Alan Quinlan, good morning to you. How you doing?
Very good, Ger. And yourself?
I'm good. I'm good. Normal life is beginning to emerge a little bit back. We have the rugby players training today, and I don't know if everybody's wearing masks out where you guys are, but that's not really the case where I am. One thing that I'm very interested in seeing happen is if we take any of the lessons from the last few months and actually don't just go back to the old way of doing stuff. And that's why I think How's the Head is very interesting, because you did find that people were being very honest about anxieties that they had, because everybody was anxious. And so it was perfectly normal to go, how are you? Well, I'm a bit freaked out. To be honest, I'm a bit freaked out. It looks like the world might be about to end. And that's why I think conversations about mental health now are going to be very important, and even more so into the future, where we reach a new level of honesty and talking to each other about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that was the whole idea. It wasn't to launch a podcast for any kind of benefit for myself. I wanted to just try and see if we could have some conversations with people, not necessarily all people who have mental health problems. I know John Kerwin is very outspoken about his challenges and battles, but just I was pretty interested and intrigued at how other people were doing during a completely unsettling period, as you say. People, and I was concerned for people who maybe avail of services or counselling or medical support, and that was all kind of shut off a little bit for them during the pandemic. And how would they cope? And I just thought no better way to no better person to have a chat with, to see how he was coping. And even though we're coming towards the end, the lockdown has been lifted and all that now, I think listening to John Kerwin, every time I listen to him, he gives me hope and confidence that the world is changing around the approach to mental health, not just for people who in society who struggle with mental health, but for everybody really. And he's inclusive in that. Business people who are successful, sports people, their mental health can be affected as well. And sometimes we look at somebody and we see success and we see money and we see success in sport or business, and we think they've no reason. And he speaks about that. So he's a perfect example of someone who was a pin-up boy in New Zealand. Everybody looked up to him. He was tall, handsome, probably the most marketable sports person in New Zealand, and he was struggling internally. So I think there's a lot of good messages there, and it was really intriguing to have that chat with him. Pat Short and Danny O'Reilly, I had a chat with them as well, just to really see how their lives were going through this. So it was very interesting.
I hope it's something that we integrate into how we talk to our kids into the future as well, as opposed to waiting until they're at a point of crisis and going, oh, it's okay to talk about this now. Actually, that we get involved in a bit of preventative stuff as opposed to it all being reactionary.
Yeah, I think to be fair to the sporting organisations and to employers throughout Ireland, I've seen a massive change in the conversations that are being having, the awareness around mental health, how important it is. For when I was growing up as a kid, it was something you never spoke about. It wasn't mentioned in school. There was no empathy towards mental health. It was toughen up, get on with it. You got to be resilient. And resilience is a very important part of mental health. And sometimes it frustrates me when people say, you've got to be resilient. You've got to take knocks. You've got to take setbacks. Of course you have. But I think if things are festering in people and they're emotionally, they get entangled, if you like, and they can't deal with the negativity or the dark picture in their head, I think they need help. And so society is changing around that. And I think it's very heartwarming for me. I've been to lots of schools throughout Ireland, and you see lots of kids doing mental health projects and really setting a great standard in their own schools. Obviously the parents or the teachers and the schools are facilitating this and encouraging them. So it's about education as well, Ger, and it's about education for kids in school, but also young people playing sport, because sometimes that emotional roller coaster of winning and losing and rejection and not being picked in the team really has a negative effect on young kids' confidence. And if coaches are more aware of that and how they deal and speak to young kids and maybe have an open conversation with parents and stuff like that, the kids can get their confidence and self-belief back and understand what they need to work on. So it's a really, really important part of working life, of sporting life, I think. And it's not a negative thing, it's a very positive thing.
Yeah, 100%. And really looking forward to that, going live today at 12 noon on OTB Sports Radio, and you can get it on the OTB Sports app after that. Let's talk a little bit about rugby coming back, because obviously it's great that we now have a fixture schedule, and you know, all being well, those matches in August will happen, the Interpros, and by that stage you would hope that things have opened up and travel bridges and all that kind of stuff that they're talking about will facilitate games between the provinces here and Wales and Scotland, and the league will be able to finish, and hopefully Champions Cup will be able to finish. In the meantime, there seems to be a bit of a battle emerging between the players and the union about just how much money the union actually have access to and how much of a pay cut the players are going to be willing to take. So there's definitely a negotiation to be had at the moment.
Yeah, it's something that's been spoken about for the last week and a half, and Rugby Players Ireland, the players' representative body, which do a wonderful job, and they're very, very important in a lot of negotiations. They were important when I was playing. You know, when you're dealing with match payments, bonuses, fees going to World Cups, things like that, and they're an important negotiator for the players. I think without the players, I think you know, the game isn't there. Without the IRFU, the finance isn't there and the structure. So they've got to work in tandem. And I think Rugby Players Ireland weren't happy that some stuff went to the media about player cuts and wage cuts and stuff like that. So I think there was more positive talks last week, and they haven't finalised what the pay cuts are going to be. But I think it's something that the players have to accept. Ultimately, there is going to be a little bit of pain here. The top players are very well paid. I think it's the younger players and the academy players and the development contracts and stuff like that. Hopefully they won't be affected. But I think the top players are going to have to accept some sort of pay cuts. And hopefully that gets sorted, because you don't want to see the players in the union at loggerheads. I think from, you know, the RFU, to be fair, are very well managed from a financial point of view. The structures here are very good. We speak about that. We're the envy of a lot of countries. And the RFU before this were in pretty good shape financially. But if you're draining €1 million a month and no crowds in the foreseeable future, and sponsorships in doubt, hospitality and venues, all that kind of stuff, opportunities to bring in revenue. So I think it's just inevitable that it's going to happen, but hopefully it gets sorted out and the players will agree. And I think that was the whole hub of it, that it was released publicly.
Is it a difficult thing to manage, Alan, if players are returning to training, and obviously players talk and they're in their little groups and they're chatting about what's going on in the background, with this bubbling under the surface as people get back onto the training paddock and start looking towards these fixtures that we finally now can look forward to, that it's something awkward for management and coaching teams to be able to stay on top of, to keep lads focused and for training to be as good as it normally would be?
Yeah, well, I think, Jared, they will all be looking forward to getting back to training. There'll be an air of excitement. I think it'll be different. They'll be in groups of 7 with one coach and all the protocols and stuff like that. There won't be much hanging around or having a cup of coffee or having food together. So it is a little bit different. And they're the parts as a rugby player you love. You love going in, having the banter, having the bit of crack in the group. So that's going to be a little bit different for them for a while. Regarding the pay cuts, I think the senior players, the Irish players in Munster, the Irish players in Leinster might be having a little bit of a whisper about what's happening. They'll be speaking to each other about how those negotiations are going. So they've got to be professional. I think they're very well paid, the Irish players. I don't think the provincial players will be chatting too much about it. I'm not sure how they're going to be affected. Obviously, if you're on a big Irish contract, 20% off that is a fairly sizable amount. But again, it's something they're just going to have to accept. I think if I was a player, and I mean this respectfully to the players, they've got to take a little bit of pain here, and that's just the reality of it. But I don't think it'll be an issue for provincial coaches getting them ready for 22nd of August. I think this stuff will be parked to one side, and that's what Rugby Players Ireland are going to do. And I'm sure some of the players who'll be working with Rugby Players Ireland, chatting to the RFU, they'll agree a deal. It'll be done. There'll be a line drawn under it, and they'll move forward. I think there will be a lot of excitement about getting back in groups for the next couple of weeks.
Football at the weekend came back, Alan, obviously in Premier League. Some good performances from individuals, some good performances from some teams, some really horrific performances from other teams and other individuals. So you can kind of see that everybody's at different stages of preparedness for it. What's the rugby been like in New Zealand by comparison?
It's been good. I think better than I expected. I think there's lots of penalties and lots to break, particularly at the breakdown. A lot of turnovers as well, which it's kind of like pre-season matches. Really, they came straight from a break for nearly 3 months into competitive matches. They had no friendlies. It was just training ground, trying to replicate contact and smaller matches and training and stuff like that. So it's fully understandable. The Blues have hit the ground running. They've won their 2 games and they look very, very strong. But lots of mistakes, Ger. But there's still that air of excitement about it. The Crusaders were brilliant at the weekend. They beat the Hurricanes 39-25 and scored 5 tries. And they just keep rolling the players out in New Zealand. And the Chiefs, of course, Warren Gatland's team have lost their first 2 games last week to the Highlanders, and they were beaten by the Blues in Hamilton, which didn't happen in a long, long time at the weekend.
Dave, you've been watching some rugby league.
I have, yeah. It was one of the first sports that came back. They were one of the first sports that I saw where they have the piped in crowd sound and everything, and it's actually a really good watch. And I haven't really watched rugby league in detail since Martin Afai and Sean Edwards were playing for Wigan in the 1980s, and Jonathan Davies was with the Warrington Wolves in rugby league. And I have to say, I should have been watching more of it. It's a phenomenal sport to watch. There's a lot to be said for the absence of the lineouts and the scrum resets and the rucks and the mauls and the pick and jams and the inordinate amount of time spent by scrum halves as they prepared to throw a box kick in over the head of the fullback or the wingers. And the willingness to offload at will is phenomenal to watch. The standard of the passing is absolutely incredible. Now, I know I'm watching the highest level. This is the NRL that I'm watching, but I'm definitely going to watch more of it. There's always a fear among rugby union aficionados that with every tweak of the rules, they're edging closer to a game of rugby league. I don't know how true that is, but for me, that wouldn't necessarily be a terrible thing, because the quickness of the game, and particularly at scrum time, obviously it's not really a scrum. It's just a really quick means to restart the game. I couldn't take my eyes off it. The standard of the kicking as well, the little grubber kicks on the 6th tackle, the up and unders that they throw in and around the 20-metre area. I sat down and watched an entire game on Saturday morning, and I enjoyed every second of it.
Right, well, you might get your wish if the rest of the law changes happen. Alan, great stuff. Congratulations on the new series. Really looking forward to it. It's going live this afternoon. Alan Quinlan's How's the Head live today on the OTB Sports app from 12 noon. And John Kerwin, the legend, is Alan's first guest.